I'm watching Game 7 last night with a friend. And he and I had kind of gone back and forth about what to expect. And before my kids went to bed, I said, who do you guys think is going to win, the Maple Leafs or the Panthers? And my kids were like, oh, the Panthers. And I was like, yeah, but like, you really think the Panthers are going to win on the road? Game 7. And they're like, yeah. I said, why? I said, I don't know. Panther could rip up a Maple Leaf. I was like, all right, good logic. And I was kind of talking my way through it, and I thought I was rooting for the Leafs because next month I'm going to be on a work trip in Toronto, and it happens to coincide with the dates of the Stanley Cup Final. And I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to be in Toronto if the Leafs have a chance to win the Stanley Cup. I could maybe try to get credentialed. I could maybe try to go through work. I could maybe try to go to like a public viewing thing, right, that they do outside of the arena. I was looking forward to the possibility of like maybe going and experiencing what it's like to be around a Stanley Cup because Lord knows we have not gotten to experience that in our lifetimes here as Flyers fans. 2010 is like the one standout, except I wasn't around for that. I was in Berlin trying to watch the Stanley Cup Final on some site that was definitely a legal site for streaming NHL games in Germany. So I didn't get to experience what that's like. I got to experience what it's like to be in Europe while the World Cup is happening, which is very cool, but also very different. So I was actually kind of rooting for the Leafs. But I knew in my heart of hearts they had no chance. I knew they were screwed because it's now 7 straight Game 7s that Toronto has lost. 7 straight Game 7s. And on the flip side, Paul Maurice is now, I think, 6-0 all-time in Game 7s as a coach, which is right up there with DeBoer, is he at 8-0, 7-0 all-time in Game 7s? He got that with the Dallas win, right? So I knew last night Toronto had no shot. The amount of pressure that's put on the Toronto players by the Toronto media and by the Toronto fan base, they were going to come up small, and they did. And I tweeted about it last night that I think it is one of the biggest Game 7 choke jobs in NHL history. And like, that's not to be hyperbolic, but it is true. Because what happened last night, and the fact that they blew a 2-0 series lead to get to this point, it just felt like they were not ready to meet the moment. And in fairness, this core, or whatever you want to call it, that consists of Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and John Tavares, just hasn't worked. It's been a really good regular season team, but it's not a team that gets it done in the postseason. It's a regular season team that can compete with anybody in the league, but when it becomes like nut crunching time, like they don't have it. Now, you could blame Mitch Marner, which is what a lot of people wanted to do last night, because there's the clip of him. Let me see if I can. I'll see if I can wrangle it here and prepare myself for the inevitable appeal for playing it on the show. But you have Mitch Marner last night getting into it with his teammates and like getting very animated with his teammates on the bench. And I looked at it and I said, I'm pretty sure that like if you're a Flyers fan and you're thinking about like, do you want to see the Flyers extend an offer of $10, $11, $12 million a year for this guy? Is this the kind of thing you want to see? And like, you know, Bleacher Report put this out yesterday. Let's turn this off. Bleacher Report put this out last night, but like, this was the clip. He goes over to the bench and he says, wake the fuck up. Now, this comes, you know, after the third goal gets scored. Now, mind you, Florida scored 3 goals in 6 minutes of game time, which was mind-numbing. And in fact, like if you fast forward a little bit to later in the game, Florida's up 4-1. They're showing a replay, and while the replay is going on, the announcer says, oh, Bennett just put the puck in the back of the net. It's now 5-1. Because TNT's broadcast somehow didn't cut out of the replay to show you the live action on a face-off, and it made it 5-1. But you see Marner go over to the bench, and like, on one hand you go, okay, if you're Mitch Marner, is it a good look for you to go yell at your teammates? Well, it does show some passion, and it does show some anger, and it does show that you give a shit. However, I will point one thing out, and I'm going to try to do it here with a little bit of a frozen screen. Let's see if we can get this guy pulled up here. I want you to look at Mitch Marner. What's the thing that stands out here? What's the thing that stands out about the optics here, the aesthetics of Mitch Marner right here? what do you notice? Right? Because Florida has just scored 3 goals, right? And this isn't like between periods. This is right after the 3rd goal gets scored. What do you notice? And if you don't notice it, I'm about to highlight it for you, okay? I want you to look right here. I want you to look at this flow right here, okay? Now, I'm a guy who appreciates a good flow. You can't tell because it looks like I've got, slick back, messy hair right now. I was getting accusations in the comments earlier about putting grease in my hair. Now, this is probably going to look worse. This is not up to my standard. But let's just imagine for a second. Let's go over here, a little bit here, a little bit this. Okay. I respect somebody who's got longer hair and it looks lovely and it's coiffed and like good on him. But what's the problem here? If you've been wearing a helmet and you've been exerting maximum effort, you're 2 periods into the game or a period and a half into the game. Your hair shouldn't look this fluffy. It shouldn't look this textured. Your hair should look greasy and sweaty. You should look like a mess. And yet this is wonderfully light, floofy, and coiffed. In fact, I saw a lot of people in Fort Lauderdale walking around with hair like this at nice restaurants. And so I guess the question is it the right thing to do? Is it the right thing to get in the face of your teammates and tell them to wake the fuck up when it looks like you've physically exerted little to no effort because you've got still very light and floofy hair? Now, I don't know. Am I crazy for feeling like optically that's not a great look? I don't know. I mean, my hair looks like shit right now, but you could almost make the case that by virtue of my hair looking so shiny right now, it looks like I might have been working up a sweat before this show over on the workout bench over there, more so than he did playing in a Game 7 of a Stanley Cup game that has the chance to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, I don't know. That's just one thought that I would have. But I did like the passion. I was actually willing to look past the lack of perspiration on the forehead and in the hair and say, he's got it down. Michael Mistichelli says, we don't need to overpay for a playoff choke artist in Philly. So this actually does kind of bring me back around to something, though, because I think that it's like important to kind of set the record straight on one thing, right? So there's this belief out there. There is a narrative out there that Mitch Marner doesn't perform in the playoffs. And if you look at this postseason, and especially if you looked at the last 5 games of what happened against the Panthers, he had 3 total points. He had they were all assists. He had 3 assists in the last 5 games of that series. He had 1 point over the last 3 games. So if you want to look at games 5, 6, and 7, he had 1 point. It was 1 assist. And like if that were to happen in Philadelphia, he would get dragged. He would get absolutely hammered by this fan base. And yet, allow me to just make a real quick pitch to you on why Mitch Marner might not be as bad as people want to make him out to be. Okay, and I get it. I get where everybody's at. This postseason, Toronto played 13 games. Mitch Marner had 13 points. That makes him a point-per-game player. Last season was an awful, awful performance by Toronto. They played 7 games. He had 3 points. Okay. Go back 2 postseasons. Go back to the 2022-23 season. 11 games played. He had 14 points, 3 goals, 11 assists. You go back to the postseason before that. They only played 7 games. He had 8 points. So he's roughly been, over these last 4 postseasons, has been somewhere around a point-per-game player. Sometimes over, and last postseason he was under. But this idea that he is a career playoff choke artist, I don't think is exactly fair. I will also note that in all the postseason series that he has going back to 2016, 2017, he has played in 70 games in the postseason. He has 63 points across those 70 games, which again, on aggregate, takes him to almost being a point-per-game player in the postseason. Now, you might think that that's totally unacceptable, and that makes him still a shitty player because if you look at his regular season numbers, he is significantly better than that and always has been significantly better than that. In fact, in 657 games in the regular season in his career, he has 741 points. That is well above a point-per-game player. You can make that case. You can also point to the fact that he had 102 points this season in 81 games. and say, well, if he had 102 points in the regular season, how is he only a point-per-game player in the postseason? I would still argue that is valuable production. Now, would it be valuable production if the guy is getting paid $12.5, $13 million on a 7-year contract? No. You would get destroyed by the Philly media and fans alike for underproducing. But if you look at his career, if you look at his production with Toronto, if we look at his last 4 seasons, he has averaged, or he's been at or near 100 points 3 out of those 4 seasons. 102 points this season. In the 2022-23 season, he had 99 points. The year before, he had 97 points. You go back to 2018, 2019, he had 94 points. Now, there were back-to-back seasons where he only had 67 points, but he only played 59 and 55 games respectively. And even in the 2021-22 season, he had 97 points. He did that in 72 games. All this is to say, Marner can produce for you at least in the regular season, and he can be potentially a point-per-game guy for you in the playoffs. If we remove the Maple Leafs of it all, right? If we just look at the production on paper, is that an immediate upgrade to the Philadelphia Flyers? The answer is very clearly yes. Now, again, there is this prevailing notion out there that Marner is an underperformer and that Marner doesn't get it done in the playoffs when it matters the most. And at 28 years of age, does he really fit the timeline? We just hired Rick Tocchet. They very clearly are looking to go gangbusters in free agency in 2026. Does getting a Mitch Marner help you entice a potential unrestricted free agent in 2026? It could. Now, I've said a bunch of times, I think Danny Briere is going to be very aggressive this offseason. I don't necessarily think that Mitch Marner is going to be Danny Briere's target. In fact, I would say it's more likely you see Briere go after a restricted free agent, a younger player, knowing that you would have to give up that first-round pick next year, and we saw what happened with the Islanders, and we saw what happened with Utah, with 2 teams having that kind of anomalous rise in the draft, and that teams like the Flyers just might think it's a terrible idea to potentially give away a first-round pick, and you never know how your season's going to go. I get that. But I think they'd be more likely to go that route and look for somebody who's in the 23, 24-year-old range than a 28-year-old who can help you right now and maybe does help you make the playoffs next year and maybe can help entice a free agent. I just don't know if I see Briere saying, yeah, that 28-year-old, and in fairness, he just turned 28 like 2 weeks ago. We want to give that 28-year-old $13 million a year for 7 years. I'm not exactly sure that that's the kind of business he wants to do. But would I expect to hear that the Flyers are trying to get a meeting with Mitch Marner? Could I see a scenario where there's a conversation had among the Flyers front office where they say, yeah, he's certainly worth having a conversation with? I would think so. Again, I think the Flyers are going to kind of exhaust every avenue here. I would fully expect that you're going to hear them involved in trade negotiations. And again, I think that they're going to be in some way, shape, or form involved in some of the UFAs that are out there.